Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about our natural tendency to want to focus on the negative aspects and negative thoughts within our lives. It's a term called negativity bias, and there's an actual real purpose for it in our lives. So let's get into that today. Hi, my name is Abigail, here to normalize these conversations and education about death and dying so we die better end of life. Let's get into it today. This term negativity bias is something that you may have heard before or not. And what it basically means is it's our tendency to focus on the negative. Regardless of whether this negative aspect of our life, these negative thoughts, whether they're actually, big deals or not, it's our natural tendency, our natural biological tendency to want to focus on the negative things. And I'm going to explain to you why that is and why that's so normal. I want to be clear and kind of present a disclaimer before I talk about this. This has nothing to do with clinically diagnosed depression, and depression-related type of conditions, okay? I'm speaking outside of those clinically diagnoses, so please do not take this within that context. I'm talking outside of those mental and type of conditions, those type of diagnoses. So please make sure to listen to this based on the fact that this is outside of those clinically diagnosed conditions. So let's get back to this negativity bias. This negativity bias has a lot to do with our survival. So the reason why I bring this up, especially on a channel that's talking about dying better, is it has a lot to do with dying better. It has a lot to do with death. In fact, the negativity bias itself is really directly related to death and our desire to not want to die. So let me get into it. We as humans, biologically, we're programmed to always be on the lookout for actual or potential threats to our well-being. So back in the day, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, when we would be out, doing the hunting and gathering type of thing, we would always be hyper aware of actual potential threats while we were out there hunting, for example, looking for animals that could hurt us, making sure that we were always part of a tribe of people, a group of people, because if we were left alone, that would mean that we would be left alone to die. So always being hyper aware of these actual or potential threats to our well-being. Why is that? Our biology, our bodies want to continue to live. We are driven to live. We don't want to die. So then you're wondering, well, okay, this kind of makes sense. We are terrified. Our bodies are terrified of dying. We're definitely not wanting to die. So let's talk about that, why that actually makes sense. So several times a day, depending on you and your metabolism, your makeup, you are driven to eat, right? You can't go a day without usually eating. I know people are, fasting nowadays and doing all those things. Okay, there's, there are practices out there that are showing the efficacy there. Okay, but we are driven to eat. We're driven to eat because our bodies don't want us to die of starvation. We're driven to drink because our bodies do not want to die of thirst. We're driven to reproduce as a species because our bodies want to continue to keep our line going and continue to keep our species going. So what does this say at the very end of the day? It says that our bodies, despite how spiritually evolved you are as a person, and despite the amount of work that you've done in terms of your fear of death, your fears in general, our bodies, our biological makeup, our body is terrified of dying. It just does not want to die, okay? It just doesn't want to die. So even when you've done all of this work and, then you're like, oh, but I'm actually thinking I'm still a little afraid of dying. It's because your body is terrified of dying. And despite all the work that you've done to think positively, maybe you're trying to do your positive affirmations, you might have a tendency, especially if you're tired, whatever it may be, a little exhausted, to default and fall back on those default patterns of focusing on the negative, looking out for the negative, because you are just biologically simply programmed to look for actual potential threats. These, what we call actual potential threats, in the negative bucket, okay? Because they're bad things. We're looking out for bad things all the time. That could be an actual potential threat to our well-being. Nowadays, it's things like, driving and being hyper aware of, not getting into an accident, or the stress from the job, your boss, right? Because if your boss comes in and you didn't do something that's an actual potential threat to you, you could possibly lose your job, be out on the streets, and die of starvation, for example. Your body has these natural patterns of associating certain things in this, especially this bucket that's actual potential threats, and it's going to make you hyper aware. So the threat to your being, an actual potential threat to your being, is always going to take precedence over the happy, positive vibes thing that you've been trying to really ingrain in your system. I'm not saying to scratch all that good work that you've done. Keep doing it. It's, you know, we as a species have evolved over many years, and we're continuing to evolve, and that's a beautiful, really amazing thing about us, is that we are evolving. So we can continue to evolve, but we also still are working with our own, you know, real, you know, down to earth biology that is still with us and really deeply ingrained in our makeup. So first things first, don't give yourself a hard time if you sometimes think negatively and feel like you just can't help but focus on the negative. Okay, first things first. You understand why. It's a protective mechanism. Our body just doesn't want to die. So despite all the work that you've done, secondly, keep doing all that work that you've done. It's good. It's, you know, it's going to keep you evolving, keep you advancing and expanding as a person. That's beautiful. But just don't get frustrated and don't think that you've failed in any way if you feel those natural tendencies to focus on the negative in your life. What we call negative. I hate putting things in positive, negative, but for the sake of this discussion, it's just much easier and clearer when, especially when we're talking about this negativity bias, because it is a very, you know, real thing for us. So focusing on these things that are actual potential threats, you know, which in today, you know, looks like having negative thoughts about not being accepted into a group, being really nervous about an upcoming work thing or a speech or something like that, or having to, you know, be disappointed in something that maybe you did and now it's not good enough, and now you've got to try to do it again, and, you know, worrying about whether or not it's going to be okay the next time, things like that. Getting rejected on a date, whatever it may be. So all these things, you know, kind of are in that category of actual potential threats, and it's natural for you to focus on them. And lastly, what I want to say is, if you are trying to work with all these negative thoughts, again, negative, you know, because it's the negativity bias. If you're still trying to work with these negative thoughts and you're getting frustrated and you're like, you know, I wish I could think positively. You know, positive thinking is a bit of a challenge, especially when you're in the midst of muck, you know, especially when you're in the midst and you're really kind of ruminating about all these kind of things, you know, that are seeming in that negative bucket. So what I tend to encourage people to do is scratch trying to be positive. It may be too hard right now. Some people, that works really well for them, and if it does for you, great, stick with that. But some people, it's just not genuine enough, and it doesn't speak to them enough to try to just make themselves, you know, think positively. It takes a lot of energy, as you can see, as you can understand now, because biologically, naturally, we have a tendency to think negatively, right? Focus on the negative, have that negativity bias. So rather than that, what I suggest is try to find something, no matter how big or small it is, that can bring some sense of gratitude to you. I tend to always be really grateful for my legs, my arms, these things that I have seen in my many years working in the medical field, that when they were not working for people, because either they had them amputated through a traumatic accident or through a condition like diabetes, their life became significantly harder. And I think of things usually connected to my body because I've had years of serious illness, especially in the last several years, where being able to do something like get up out of bed and, you know, take myself to the bathroom and give myself a shower, all those types of things, and how easy it is because I have my two arms and my two legs. So for me, that's what it is. But for whatever it is for you, it can be whatever it is. It could be, you know, your pet, it could be your child, your family, whatever it is that really does connect you to a sense of gratitude. Getting into that feeling of gratitude can help assuage, can help move us a little bit beyond the negative thinking that we're experiencing at that moment. And I want to be clear, and I've said this in other videos, that you can feel different emotions at the same time. So you don't have to allow the negativity to rule your day. It will take some effort, okay? It will take a little bit of effort. I almost titled this video, Is Negative Thinking Just Being Lazy? And I just think that would give the wrong vibe out, because that's really, I don't want to sound judgmental or anything like that, but in a way, allowing ourselves to just default to our natural patterns, which is really that negativity bias, is kind of saying that we're just allowing it to do that, and we're not really doing anything proactively or actively to try to maneuver it, our thinking into a different way of thinking. And of course, that matters if it matters to you. Some people, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they don't desire to have to change their way of thinking or way of focusing on the negativity bias today. That's fine. To each their own. Maybe today is not the day that you're trying to focus on that. Maybe today is just the day that you're just trying to get through the damn day, okay? And sometimes we have those days and we just gotta get through them, whether we're focusing on the negative or not, because we just need to get through them. There's too much going on, it's too hard, and we just need to get through the day, be able to go to sleep and wake up and have a new day, and maybe the new day will focus on something else. So I just wanted to kind of say that, because I never wanted to think that I'm judging people, because no way am I judging people. We are all in this together. We're all basically the same. So I shared the aspect about bringing in a little bit of gratitude in the case that you really want to try to move beyond your negative thinking. Try that little exercise. And if you have any other questions or thoughts on this, please feel free to put them down. But I need to reassure you again, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, especially if you've committed yourself to changing and evolving and being the best version of you. I commend you for that. That is so amazing, because that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes consistent practice. Whether you do it daily, weekly, whatever it is, it's a lot of effort. So keep doing that if that's something that you're striving toward, but please don't diminish all this progress, all this work, all this effort that you've done, especially if you have a day or bad days or bad weeks where you are focusing on the negative and really kind of like feeling like you're focusing on the negative. Because again, that's a very natural thing for us, okay? All that's doing, again, is making us be hyper aware to actual potential threats so that we can keep living. Our body just doesn't want to die. That's just the bottom line, just doesn't want to die, okay? So thank you so much again for joining me today. You are doing a better job than you even realize, and I just feel like I have to remind you of that, because you're really doing a better job than you realize. Even though when we feel like we're stumbling, you're doing a better job than you realize. Thinking about you, really helping you have a better day today than you did yesterday. I'm Abigail, here to normalize these conversations and education about death and dying so we die better at the end of life. Have a good one. Talk to you soon.